This gripping story begins 250 years ago in the Frankfurter Judengasse, the worst Jewish ghetto in Germany. Which is to say, something. Think of the worst neighborhood you know and add a sprinkle of medieval oppression. Jews in Europe had a long history of being humiliated, displaced, and annihilated. It wasn't a fun time to be Jewish. Back then in Frankfurt, Jews were crammed into the Judengasse, which literally means Jewish lane. And what a lane it was. A measly 300 meters long, with 3 entrances that were locked tight at night and on Christian holidays. Cozy, right? Imagine about 3,000 people living in 197 houses, roughly 15 people per household. You couldn't swing a cat without hitting a dozen of them. The living conditions? Let's just say they were a nightmare. It's hard to believe anyone could impose such conditions on other human beings, but such things happen even today, most ironically, in Palestine.
You can't come to my house. The checkpoint, they close it on the night. It's only Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday, 1 hour in the morning and 1 hour in the evening, we're allowed to pass the checkpoint. No visitors, no ambulances, no kindergartens, no schools, no jobs.
If there's an emergency, what do you do?
Nothing, die.
This is the world Mayer Amschel Rothschild, the founder of the Rothschild banking dynasty, was born into. If you didn't know, his family name came from the house's sign, a red shield, or Rothschild. You see, in medieval times, most people were illiterate, so having a sign over your house just made it easier for everybody. As you can imagine, Mayer's early life was difficult. At age 12, he lost both parents to smallpox. Tragic? Sure. But this tragedy was a backhanded stroke of luck. With no one to care for him, Mayer got a rare permit to leave the ghetto and was sent to Hanover to learn a trade. It wasn't a cash economy like today. Rulers got their power from owning land and exploiting peasants. Jews couldn't be lords or peasants, so they turned to trade and financial services, one of the few things they were allowed to do. No land was needed, just brains. Mayer learned to trade antiques and coins and got really good at it. By the time he returned to Frankfurt at 18, he was a coin expert. He even created a catalogue of his coins, a remarkable early example of marketing genius. His special ability for seeing the big picture and valuing information got him ahead of the competition and landed him a big fish: Prince William of Hesse-Kassel. This prince was rolling in dough selling Hessian mercenaries and shared Mayer's passion for antiques, coins, and money. This relationship laid the foundation for the Rothschilds' success, as he began issuing international loans, borrowing capital from the Landgrave. In 1770, another stroke of luck, or love, came Mayer's way. He married Guttle Schnapper, a remarkable woman from one of the few wealthy Jewish families in the ghetto. She brought a dowry of 2,400 gulden, quite a fortune at the time. Mayer used this money to expand his banking services. The business and family grew successfully. Mayer and Guttle had 10 children, 5 boys and 5 girls. The family diversified into cotton, coffee, furs, and letters of credit to shopkeepers. Mayer knew the power of information and networking and gave his children responsibilities in the business. To the males, that is. His 5 sons were like arrows shot across Europe. Nathan established the first branch in London in 1804. Jacob settled in Paris in 1811. Salomon was sent to Vienna, and Karl opened offices in Naples in the 1820s, while the eldest son, Amschel, remained in Frankfurt. They made their bank the first international bank, coordinating banking strategies like a well-oiled machine. And speaking of strategies, one was keeping the family ties as close as they could be. Maybe a little too tight. Before Mayer died, he left strict instructions for his heirs to keep the fortune within the family, encouraging marriages among relatives. Titles and property could only pass through the male line.
In our family, we've always tried to keep love in the family. In this sense, it was more or less understood since childhood that children would never think of marrying outside the family, so that our fortune would never leave it. You couldn't write that today.
In fact, of Nathan's 7 children, 4 married Rothschild first cousins. This inbreeding was both genetically and morally questionable, but it bred loyalty and kept the money in the family. Between 1824 and 1877, there were a total of 36 marriages of Mayer Rothschild's male descendants. Of these, 30 were married within the family. Today, we're glad to report they've stopped marrying their cousins. Now they can marry anybody. Mayer Rothschild's flourishing banking empire was built on clever tactics. For instance, back then, Jews had their mail censored and delivered late in the day. But Mayer wasn't one to let a little thing like systematic discrimination slow him down. Here's what he did. Jews could view, but not open their mail earlier in the day at the post office. Mayer devised a system of color-coding envelopes to keep himself quickly informed about changes in the value of the pound sterling. Blue meant the currency had risen. Red signified a fall. Half a day is saved, he explained, and half a day in the financial world can make a world of difference. Clever, right? In 1810, Mayer entered into a formal partnership agreement with his 3 eldest sons, founding the Rothschild and Söhne Bank. They lent money to governments, funded wars, and sometimes played both sides, like in the Napoleonic Wars. They became equal opportunity lenders, making money from friends and foes. One of the juiciest rumors against the family was that they took advantage of knowing the outcome of the Battle of Waterloo ahead of time. You might have heard the tale. A French pamphlet entitled Histoire édifiante et curieuse de Rothschild, written by some guy calling himself Satan, painted James, one of the other brothers, as a ruthless capitalist and enemy of the French people. The pamphlet sold across Europe like hotcakes. It also told the tale of how Nathan witnessed the battle in person, rode to the coast in a mad rush, bribed a fisherman to ferry him to England through a terrible storm, and reached London 24 hours before the official news. Supposedly, he made a killing on the stock market, gaining 20 million in a single coup. This family is our evil genius, insisted Satan. Sounds like a gripping novel, right? Too bad it's mostly fiction. Nathan Rothschild was not at Waterloo. The pamphlet came out 30 years after the battle and 10 years after Nathan had kicked the bucket. So there's no evidence he made special arrangements to get early news of the battle, whether by pigeon post or any other means. Sure, he may have gotten the news a little before the average Joe, and he seems to have profited from it. But he did not engineer a market panic or made a great killing. Historical records show many investors made far larger profits that week. The legend of Nathan Rothschild and Waterloo is just that, a legend. If any of it were true, it would have surfaced in his correspondence with his brothers elsewhere in Europe, but it didn't. Nor was it mentioned in any newspaper report during his lifetime. The cherry on top? Nathan was offered a knighthood a few weeks after Napoleon's defeat, which he rejected. If he'd done anything shady, the government wouldn't have offered him such an honor. So yes, the Rothschilds did fund some wars and sometimes benefited from them. For instance, they smuggled gold across Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. But conspiracy theorists like to stretch the facts, claiming they even started wars for their own benefit. There's no evidence for that, though. But the theorists might be right on something, as major wars might not have been fought on such a grand scale without funding from this family of Jewish German financiers. But deliberately starting wars? That's a bit much. That would have been too Cheney. I mean, too shady. One thing is clear. The Rothschilds were in the business of making money, and one such big moment came in 1833. You see, racial issues in Georgian England were far more complicated than Bridgerton would have you believe. Though Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807, thanks to the efforts of black abolitionists, slavery remained legal in the British colonies until 1833, the year when Britain decided it was time to abolish slavery. Good for them, right? Well, hold your applause. Britain needed a whopping 20 million gilt, which was 40% of its national budget, to buy freedom for all the slaves in the empire. That's more than £2 billion in today's money. The government coughed up 5 million in bonds, but was still 15 million short. So who do they call? The Rothschilds, of course. And so they got a 15 million gilt loan from them. Now, here's the kicker. The compensation wasn't for the slaves. It was for the slave owners. That's right. The slave owners got the cash. Some of that money even went back into the pockets of the Rothschilds because they were allowed to use slaves as collateral. Documents from a University College London project published in the Financial Times revealed that Nathan Rothschild had mortgaged 88 slaves in Antigua. He used them as collateral, the debt defaulted, and then he sought to recoup the £3,000 he was owed through a government compensation scheme. And let's not forget that the entire Industrial Revolution was fueled by slave labor. It was a win-win situation for the ruling families. Talk about a twisted financial loop. You can't make this stuff up. The loan was so massive that it took the British government 182 years to pay it back in full. They finally settled the debt in 2015. So, while you were binge-watching cat videos on YouTube, part of the British people's taxes was still paying off this debt. Being a Jewish family themselves, the Rothschilds were no strangers to the centuries of suffering their people had endured, especially in Europe. On the other hand, they probably also knew that their wealth and influence didn't exactly win them any popularity contest. On the contrary, it had just added fuel to the anti-Semitic fire, spiced up with a touch of class struggle, nationalism, and the joys of industrialization. So, what did they do? They invested their economic and political resources into supporting civil rights for Jews. Now, when it came to Israel, family gatherings might have needed referees. Not everyone in the Rothschild clan was thrilled about the Zionist dream of establishing an Israeli state as the solution to Jewish troubles. But then there was Baron Edmund Rothschild, son of the French family's big boss. In 1881, he became a die-hard Zionist, and when you've got deep pockets, your hobbies get ambitious. He bought over 500 square kilometers of land in Palestine and founded more than 40 Jewish settlements. Jump to 1916. British politicians, always the experts in making promises with other people's property, figured that by backing Zionism, the Jews might help them cover the mounting costs of World War I. These Christian gentlemen also believed that modern Zionism would fulfill a divine promise, resettling the Jews in their ancestral lands. So, Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour wrote a declaration addressed to Lionel Walter, second Lord Rothschild, the unofficial leader of the British Jewish community and Baron Edmund's nephew. The Balfour Declaration became the diplomatic cornerstone for Israel's legitimacy. Despite some family squabbles, the Rothschilds, both individually and collectively, have been Israel's most loyal and committed supporters. They lobbied, bought land, established industries and institutions, and even funded public services. Then came World War II and the horrors of the Holocaust, destroying centuries of Jewish life in Europe and killing millions of Jews. In the aftermath of this genocide, the Zionist movement grew in popularity. And after some back-end forth with the British government, the US, the UN, and Jewish terrorists, the State of Israel was finally realized. Even though the Rothschilds' wealth and influence have taken a hit over the years, they aren't exactly living paycheck to paycheck. They are still sitting on a fortune that's estimated at $1 billion. Not too shabby, but certainly not the richest of the rich. In fact, they're not even the wealthiest family in the world anymore. That title now belongs to the House of Nahyan, the ruling royal family of the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, with a massive net worth of $305 billion, 300 times richer than the Rothschilds. Now, before you start feeling too sorry for them, remember this. Their wealth is spread out like butter on toast among numerous family members, trusts, foundations, and a buttload of investments. This makes calculating the exact net worth of the entire family as simple as trying to herd a bunch of cats. Now, one of the most significant blows, both financial and personal, that the Rothschilds went through was World War II. Adolf Hitler, the guy with the tiny mustache, knew how to whip up the fear and conspiracy theories that were already in the minds of the German people. He claimed the Jews were the cause of all their misfortunes and blamed them for everything that went wrong in Germany, from losing the First World War to the threat of communism, and even the country's economic and moral decline. Once he established his dictatorship in 1933, the Nazi propaganda machine kicked into high gear, producing large quantities of posters and films that reinforced this narrative. One such piece of cinematic trash was a film called Die Rothschilds, produced in 1940. The family became the poster child for evil in Nazi Germany, a reputation that stuck around for generations. During the war, most of the Rothschilds, like other prominent Jewish families, had the means to flee the Nazis. But for some stupid reason, Louis Rothschild, who ran the family's Vienna Bank and owned the most extensive private collection of 18th century art, didn't make it out in time. Instead, he was captured by the Gestapo and locked up for 14 months on the 5th floor of the Metropole Hotel on Mörzenplatz. During that time, they were negotiating his release, which resulted in the most enormous ransom in history. A whopping $21 million in those days. And if that wasn't enough, the Nazis also seized the family's bank, properties, and Louis' incredible art collection. Fast forward to 1999, when the Austrian government finally agreed to return about 250 of the stolen art treasures to the Rothschilds. Better late than never. While the French branch of the family got their bank back after the war, they weren't so lucky in 1982 when President François Mitterrand's socialist government decided to nationalize it. What they still have in abundance, though, thanks to the internet, is their own conspiracy theories. And they are just like a bad rash that won't go away. Many of these theories play on some old anti-Semitic stereotypes, like Jews being greedy and unscrupulous, like Judas. But the most poisonous and pervasive allegations come from a document published in Tsarist Russia in 1903 called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This fabricated text claimed that there was a Jewish plot for world domination, and the Rothschilds, being the most powerful Jewish family in history, were the perfect suspects in this villainous plot. The one about the Titanic. According to this one, the Rothschilds and their loyalists planted bombs on the Titanic to take out 3 of their rivals: Jacob Astor, Isidor Straus, and Benjamin Guggenheim, who supposedly opposed the creation of the US Federal Reserve Bank. The theory claims that after these 3 guys were out of the picture, the Rothschilds were able to pave the road for its establishment and set up the control center for the New World Order. In 2011, a fact check from Reuters put this one to rest. stating there was no evidence that the trio was sabotaged or that they even opposed centralized banking. And just to clear things up, Professor Robert Hockett from Cornell Law School says, "It's always a tip-off that someone is ignorant of Fed matters when they refer to the Federal Reserve Bank. There is no such entity. There is, rather, a Federal Reserve System with 12 regional Federal Reserve District banks spread all over the country, so as to avoid excessive centralization, and a regulatory agency called the Federal Reserve Board of Governors to oversee this system." The one about New World Order. Adherents believe that a cabal of powerful elites is secretly implementing a dystopian international governing structure that will grant them complete control over the global populace. Under this regime, dissidents will be arrested and the masses enslaved. Supporters of the conspiracy theory claim that most global leaders are complicit in the establishment of this New World Order, aiding through the manufacturing of global events. Depending on who you ask, these elites would be the Illuminati, the Freemasons, a cabal of satanic Jews like the Rothschilds or George Soros, a race of reptilian aliens, or perhaps a mix of all of them. According to some, the emergence of COVID-19 was part of their plans. The Rothschilds, along with Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, were all in cahoots, fabricated the pandemic to make a killing with the sales of vaccines, and at the same time, wipe out a chunk of the population. Again, there is absolutely no evidence for any of it. The one about the space lasers. In 2021, Marjorie Taylor Greene, a far-right US politician, suggested on Facebook that California's wildfires weren't natural. She claimed they were started by PG&E with the help of the Rothschilds using, you guessed it, a space laser. Why? To clear land for a high-speed rail project. This one sounds really plausible, right? Well, saying stuff like that launched her from political activist and gym owner to congresswoman, because apparently that's where we're at now. The one about Satan. If there are two things conspiracy theorists are obsessed about, are satanic rituals and the use of children in all kinds of nefarious acts. So, naturally, the Rothschilds have been accused of both. Some people claim the Rothschilds are direct descendants of none other than the devil himself, which is why they were all about interbreeding to keep their lineage pure. You see, this is an old story that goes back to the 12th century about Jews killing Christian children for rituals, and it's popped up again and again. Hurting children is one of the worst things you can say someone is doing. It's an easy way to demonize your enemy, says Catherine Olmsted, a professor of history at the University of California, Davis, who has studied conspiracy theories. The one about Abramovich? Conspiracy theorists use a picture of Jacob Rothschild posing with Marina Abramovich, one of the many artists the family has given patronage to, as proof of their relationship with Satanism. In the picture, they are posing in front of a painting called Satan Summoning His Legions. The picture was taken at the Royal Academy of Arts and is not hers. To give you some context, Abramovich is a Serbian artist known for her extreme performances, the type where you endure maintaining physically rigorous poses for extended periods, sort of like a starting YouTuber. But also very controversial for some of her performances, which are considered by some overtly satanic, like when she sat on top of 2.5 tons of cow bones, scrubbing them. Or the time she lay in the center of a burning 5-pointed star, and she ended up losing consciousness. But her most controversial piece, called Spirit Cooking, which includes pig blood graffiti on the wall of occult or disgusting instructions, had a deep social impact when it was used as a political grenade against the Democratic Party when leaked emails from John Podesta, the chairman of Hillary Clinton's campaign, placed him in one of those dinners, provoking a variety of theories about an alliance among government, media, and the occult. She may or may not believe in satanic rituals. That much is not clear to us, but she does serve up low-paid naked women as human centerpieces for wealthy guests, which indeed reminds us of the existence of debauchery elites. But I digress. The one about the party. Another thing that didn't help the Rothschilds' image with the common people was a very theatrical party called the Surrealist Ball that, as the name suggests, was a surrealist masterpiece. Realized by the large pockets of Baron Guy de Rothschild and his wife, the first Catholic to marry into the family, Marie-Hélène. It was semi-curated by the father of the surrealist movement himself, Luis Buñuel. The night was the epitome of eccentric extravagance. Invitations were sent out with the cryptic dress code, black tie, long dresses, and surrealist heads. The instructions were typed backward, so they had to be read in a mirror. As guests arrived, the front of the chateau was floodlit as if it were on fire. The party foreshadows Kubrick's final film, Eyes Wide Shut, and its dreamlike mists of secrecy, opulence, and sex. Therefore, it is no surprise that the images of such a party have been a treasure trove for conspiracy theorists. We can go on about all these theories all day, but really, none of them have any meat in the bone. There are plenty of interesting facts about this family, good and bad, to resort to fairy tales and lose sight of the fact that no one person or family or single group controls the world. We all play a part in creating it, and although some have more influence than others, evidently, history, just like reality, is a complex fabric of interwoven actions and reactions. Thank you for watching, and until the next story, be kind. Like and subscribe.